Hi everyone, Ren here. Thanks for joining me. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. So I'm not going to take you through a regular yoga class like we usually do. Today we're going to talk about the relationship between strength and flexibility and how they really depend on each other. So things we'll need for class today. You actually don't need a yoga mat. It's going to be preferable for you to be on a hard surface, so like a non-carpeted surface, whether you have tile floor, wood floor, whatever, something to that effect. If you have yoga blankets or something similar to a yoga blanket that's like thinner and not a slippery material, then grab 2 of those. If you don't have that, then instead of using like a little couch blanket or something that you have, it'll probably be better to use either bath towels or beach towels. So grab 2 of those. And then third and final item, something like this, just like a longer, kind of like a hand towel. You could also use a scarf, t-shirt, just something that's thin that can just go between your foot and the floor. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that shortly. Even though I'm sitting on this exercise ball, you do not need an exercise ball. But I want to spend the first couple minutes just kind of talking about the relationship between strength and flexibility and sort of debunking the notion that these are they have a dichotomous relationship, meaning that they are oppositional of one another. Really, they are symbiotic. And so if you have too much of one, whichever one it is, it's going to set you up perfectly for injury. So if we have super duper flexibility without strength, it's a great environment to get injured. Same thing, all strength and no flexibility or limited flexibility sets us up for injury. So the combination of flexibility and strength is where we get our mobility and our greatest stability. And so it's kind of this incorrect notion that we either have to be these super muscular, strong people or these super wafy, thin, spindly, flexible people. Because I'm going to tell you, if you look up people like Dylan Werner on Instagram, you'll see that he's extremely muscular, but extremely flexible. And just looking at him, if you happen to walk past him on the street, you might not necessarily think that he's quite as flexible as he is. And to the same token, Ashley Galvin, if you look her up on Instagram, you would look at her and think, she's like this. There's no way that she's super strong, but man, is that incorrect. So anyway, I digress. I think that the central tenet of both of these opposite ends of this spectrum is kind of what we get in our heads, is this picture of, what our yoga practice needs to look like or what our muscular body needs to look like. And that all really comes down to ego and our attachment to a result. And so today, and hopefully every day, I'm going to ask that we just let go of that. I feel like mirrors in a yoga studio are kind of a little bit of a blessing and mostly a curse. A blessing in that sometimes it's nice to be able to check out your alignment and say, oh, I didn't notice, in a weight-bearing posture, my knee was further than my ankle. That's helpful feedback. You don't always necessarily feel that in your body. But over time, you may feel the detriment of that through injury. On the opposite side of that, which kind of goes into what I was saying before about letting go of the attachment to what we think things should look like, is the need to check in with, like, does this Warrior 2 pose look like the best Instagram photo of a Warrior 2 pose ever? That doesn't necessarily mean it's good or that we're engaging muscularly properly. So anyway, that's my little soapbox. I'm going to take you from feet all the way up, and we're going to just go through how we can engage and use strength and mobility drills, which we'll do some of together, to optimize our strength, flexibility, mobility, and above all, safety. So join me over. If you do have a yoga mat set up, that's fine. We can actually start there. If you don't need one, don't worry. But just as kind of a little experiential check-in, I'd like to start off just by going through the sun salutation, and we'll just do 3. The first time through, I'm going to cue and show you how to lower down using the help of your knees. The second time through, we'll do chaturanga to upward facing dog. The third time, you choose, yogi's choice. All right, so we'll just start. You can face me. I'll just turn to the side for ease of demonstration. Stand with your feet about hips width apart, and then take an inhale and reach your arms up. Exhale, fold forward. Knees can be straight or bent. Doesn't matter how low you go. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, place your hands down on the mat or on the floor and step your feet back so that you come into plank pose or the top of a push-up. Gently lower your knees and exhale and lower all the way down to your belly. Inhale, peel the chest forward and up, baby cobra. Exhale, pressing back through a tabletop shape, and then hips high to down dog. Take a couple breaths here in downward facing dog and just notice what your body is feeling. Notice where you feel a stretch. Notice if you feel any loading of the joints. And then inhale, look forward in between your thumbs. Exhale, step forward into a fold. Inhale, halfway up. Exhale, fold. And inhale, stand all the way up and reach up. Exhale, press your hands together, slide them down in front of your chest, and then hands by your sides. Feel free to repeat that. I'm going to cue the transition a little differently this time. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, plant your hands and step back to plank. Option to use the knees or stay lifted. Rock the shoulders forward of the wrists and lower down halfway. Straighten the arms, flip to the tops of the feet, or if you lowered down to the belly, come up to cobra. And then everybody exhale, hips high, down dog. Couple breaths here. Inhale, look forward between the thumbs. Exhale, step forward to fold. Inhale, up halfway. Exhale, fold. Inhale, all the way to stand, arms overhead. Exhale, hands through the heart and down. Last time, however you want to do it. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, plant your hands and step back. Lower down with or without the help of your knees, either all the way or halfway. Press up, cobra or up dog. Hips up and back, down dog. 2 breaths. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, travel forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, hands to heart. And down by your sides. Awesome. So we'll do that again at the end, hopefully with some noticeable differences for you. So if you were using a mat or a rug or anything underneath you for that portion, get rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the feet. So take your little washcloth or scarf or whatever it was that you had and set it down in front of you. I find this to be easier if you take a seat. So you sit on the couch or on a chair, or if you're like me and you have a brand new love affair with an exercise ball, then you can do that too. Whatever is handy and convenient for you. But we're going to take the foot and put it down on that little towel. So heel close to the edge. And you can definitely do this standing too. And we'll do one full round on each foot. So I want to start off by talking about the concept of the arch, which is the strongest weight-bearing structure there is, which is why we have two of them underneath us. And so it's kind of hard to conceptualize having strength or flexibility in our feet unless you are, a dancer. Then you probably have some idea of the importance of that, or maybe even some runners. So to start off, we're just going to start to curl the toes and inch the long end of this towards us. The heel stays down. So we're just kind of grasping with the toes, letting go, grasp and let go. And then we'll get it all the way here. You may even get a foot cramp from this if this is something that you're not used to doing. And that's all right. That's why this is a practice, and we need to do it more than once in our life. So as you get close to the end, if it's getting kind of caught and bunched up under your foot and it just won't go any further, that's fine. And then we're going to push it back the other way with that same grasp and push. Good. All right. Same thing, other foot. If you are sitting, I encourage you to lean forward and put some weight down into the foot rather than just kind of letting it back. I want you to feel the sensation of the foot pressing into the floor. So just grasp and pull. You may find one easier than the other. And it's easy to want to cheat and scoot the heel back. So if that happens, just push it back forward. We're just using the toes. And even if it's not really coming towards you, as long as you can see that you're bunching that fabric up and then letting it go, I would, be focused more on that than, whether the opposite end comes all the way towards you or not. And now we'll start to push it back away. Awesome. So now that we have a little bit of a sense of what it feels like to be involved with the musculature of the feet, I'm going to encourage you to stand up for this next one. And we're only going to move in the arch of the foot. So lift up your toes and then see if you can, the toes might touch down or curl a little bit, but I want to make the distinction between the difference between what we just did and what we're doing now. So we're not pulling with our toes here. We're really just engaging the ball of the foot and the heel of the foot towards one another. It's a very subtle movement, and you may not even really notice much movement of this fabric underneath you. I think if you look close at my foot, you can barely see it moving. You may be moving that fabric just like 1/8 of an inch or something like that. But just to kind of get a sense of what it feels like to use the arch of the foot without the help of curling the toes in. So we'll try it on the other foot a couple times. I would say it's pretty common to feel a significant difference in the ability of one foot as compared to the other, especially with this one. Many, many years, a lifetime in fact, of wearing shoes has sort of changed our relationship with how our foot experiences what's underneath us. And the incentive for the intrinsic muscles of our feet to actually do their job. So many years ago, I'm sure, especially if you were at all entrenched in the running community, when the book Born to Run came out, we saw this huge barefoot running phenomenon where people went from a lifetime of wearing very supportive shoes to very minimalist shoes. And that's a transition that needs to happen. So a bunch of people injured their feet, and then everyone wrote off the barefoot movement, which, 30 some odd years of wearing shoes and then going straight to barefoot, it's not, I guess, the proper or ideal way to go about that transition. So if that's something that interests you, I would encourage you to do it slowly and over time. There are all kinds of less supportive shoe options. I would start off using them for walking first and not just diving right into running with minimalist or barefoot shoes. So now, where we've built strength, we're going to encourage flexibility. And just like always, we're never going to stretch or hold a static stretch of cold muscles or muscles that are not warmed up. So we've warmed up the intrinsic muscles of the feet. So we'll go ahead and go back into a foot flexibility drill, which can be called toe crusher or broken toe pose. If you've ever done yoga with me, I've probably made you do this. So we're going to curl the toes under. Make sure even your pinky toe comes to face forward. Then we're going to sit back on the heels. Now you know your body, and you know the difference between an intense stretch sensation and pain. So if sitting back on your heels like this with the toes curled under feels unsafe or scary for your foot, and it's more than just like a really unpleasant stretch, then back off a little bit. You can be here, you can even be here, or you can take a pillow or your other blanket and put it in between. But if you're like, yeah, I guess it's just really not my favorite thing in the world, that doesn't feel unsafe, I don't feel tearing or sharp pain, then let's hang out here for a moment. And it's important to realize if you start to grip anywhere, gripping and holding of the breath, clenching of the jaw, tensing of the shoulders, tensing of the belly, see if we can shake that off despite the building pressure and sensation in the feet. And this one really is cumulative, so it's the more time you spend in this, kind of the more intense it becomes. Let's tap into that breathing. Deep inhales all the way into the belly, and those nice full exhales. And the more often you practice this lovely shape, the less intense it becomes. Go ahead and rock forward. Uncurl the toes and tap the tops of the feet down. And then leave the tops of the feet down and go ahead and sit back. So people tend to have one movement of the foot or the other that's easier for them. So for a lot of people, getting the foot to lay down flat and sit back is really more of a challenge than curling the toes under. So if you're in this position and you feel like, oh my goodness, the tops of my feet, I can't flatten them out like that, take a little something, roll it underneath, put it right in the fronts of your ankles towards the tops of the feet, and give a little support there. So just knowing what is right for your body, let going of that ego or the need to push and do the perfect version of everything that I say here today, and knowing that it's perfectly fine to do whatever the perfect version of it for your body is. A couple other little notes on feet. You can take any comfortable position. So as we start to move on up from the feet into the ankles, we have all kinds of movement that we can do with our ankles. We can point. and flex. And so this is moving into our plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. And then they can move kind of side to side, or what can be called supination or inversion, or pronation or eversion. And so that's just kind of moving the arches in and up, and then moving the outer edges of the feet out. And it may be a big range of motion for you, it may be a small range of motion for you. That doesn't really matter. Just kind of understanding what your relationship is with each of those movements really is the point. So also understanding how that relates to the way that your walking or running gait is useful. So if you happen to already know, like, oh, I'm an overpronator, or if somebody has said maybe you collapse into your arches, that's another way of kind of saying the same thing. It's probably more common than seeing people roll more to the outer edges of the feet, but not necessarily always true. So understanding what your relationship to that joint is and how it moves helps you to kind of unlock the reasons why. Whichever surface is pulled downward, so if you tend to roll to the inside edges of your feet, it's likely that the outside edges of your legs and glutes are tight. They're shortening up and they're pulling the outer edges of your legs shorter. These muscles are probably then a little bit more, I guess we can say, flexible. Same thing goes. So if you tend to collapse into the outer edges of the feet, we're probably shorter here and maybe have more range of motion here. Another way of saying that could be stronger and weaker, because remember, we can have lack of flexibility from too much strength or not enough. So moving on up, we'll get into knees. And so here I am in this deep squatting position. Two things that we can do with our knees. We can overbend them, or we can lock them back. And so you may be wondering, well, my knee is a joint. How do I have strength or flexibility in my knee or in my ankle? And those are very good questions. And the answer is you don't. It's a joint. It's the supporting structures, the musculature and the ligamenture surrounding those joints. Without our muscles, our joints, and our bones, they're super flexible and they're not strong. So it's our job to support them properly so we avoid injury. So something that's going to get us both into that forward angle of the ankle, which tends to be pretty challenging for people to deeply bend this way, and the knees. We're going to get into the hips here too, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So squatting is a really great way to do that. And so if your squat is kind of like what I'm doing here, you see my heels are way lifted off the floor, that is less than ideal for the knees. So if you can come into a squat with your heels grounded, then super. If that's not happening, it's okay, it's not bad. You're not bad at squatting, your body's just not used to it. So we'll take any amount of support underneath the heels. It can be a little, it can be a lot. That part doesn't matter. What matters is that you feel grounded down in the heels. So that you could kind of sit here and sit back. Many people are not aware. This is actually the ideal resting position for the human body. And a lot of us think that's insane to say, because we sit in chairs our entire lives. But if you observe children, before we sit them in a classroom for 18 years, they're right here. It's not because they have a lower center of gravity, it's because the body is innately meant to do this. And then we sit in a chair for, 18, 20, 50 years, the lower back and the tailbone curl under as opposed to flare out. We lose the ability to deeply bend in that forward angle of the ankle or dorsiflex. And it comes back over time and with practice. So I won't leave you here too long, but these are just some concepts to think about. Now, the concept of strength in this shape is also just as important as the flexibility piece. So if we're here, but we can't do this, then we're overloading our joints. And that's what I meant by overbending the knee. You might think, well, how do I overbend my knee? It's not necessarily the range of motion, but it's the amount of pressure being put here. So this concept of having strength at your greatest point of flexibility is so, so important and will serve you so well over time to incorporate that. And it forces us to take that ego piece out of so many things, and you'll see that more as we move along. So if I'm here, but I have to do one of these to get up out of it, I'm not ready to be down there. And it would serve me much better to use something. I happen to have yoga blocks nearby, but you don't have to have yoga blocks for this. It would serve me better to start off like this. I'm still doing all of these same things, and it's probably more likely that I can push up from there. Make sense? Yes, awesome. So, moving on up, getting more into the opposite motion of the knee. When we're in a forward fold, a lot of times it's common for people to press back really too much in the straightness of the knee. And that's, again, one of those little things we need to kind of let go of the ego. Am I straightening my legs to make them look super straight at the expense of the safety of my hamstrings and my knee joint? Well, then it might serve me better to bend my knees a little. Same thing in downward facing dog. Who cares how straight your legs are? That is not the purpose of this shape, and a lot of people tend to incorrectly think it is. If I'm worried about how straight my legs are, but my low back is rounded and my heels are way lifted and I'm crunched up in my shoulders, well, who cares how straight your legs are? We've lost the integrity of this shape. The purpose of this shape is to keep that tailbone pressing back, the sitting bones pressing up and apart from one another. And we'll get into some more mechanics with this shape here in a minute. But if it causes me to bend my knees in order to get my sitting bones to press up, that is going to serve me a lot better than straightening my legs and looking kind of like this. So I guess that's it for the knees for now. So moving up into the pelvis, and I could spend an entire day talking about the pelvis. I'll try to keep it as condensed as possible. But first, just understanding the mobility of the pelvis. And so you can either do this kneeling or standing, but just start to tuck under and then flare back. And I'll show you that from this side. Tuck and flare. So these are the posterior and anterior tilts of the pelvis. So if you can imagine your pelvis like a bowl or a cup, when you tip it forward, the contents of that would spill forward. That's your anterior tilt. When you tuck it back and the contents of that were to spill behind you, that's your posterior tilt or posterior tuck. So as you do this, try to really accentuate both of these movements and see what kind of muscular engagement you feel or don't feel. Or maybe you feel in one way and then in the other way you feel like that lets go. And then we can do a little side to side, and this doesn't necessarily mean like really moving the legs a whole lot, but but just little, it's very subtle. And it's almost like you had little strings attached and you were pulling one up and then the other. And then take circles in one direction. Maybe 3 times. And then change directions. So the pelvis and the pelvic floor really support all of the internal organs. They're the beginning of the supports of the spine and are the attachment points for the muscles in the core and kind of the segue from lower to upper body. So let's start off with our feet more than hip width apart, with the toes facing perhaps maybe a little like a 45-degree angle. You don't need to be all the way open left and right, but so that the knees and the toes are facing in the same direction. And then we'll just take a little squat down. Doesn't have to be heroic. It can be maybe just an inch or 2. And then just notice where you start to fatigue first. Also, be aware of the integrity of the angle of the legs. So still, kneecap and toes facing in the same direction. If you notice your knees collapsing inward or we're rolling onto the inner edges of the feet, then maybe we need to adjust our stance a little bit, shorten it up, or come up a little higher. And then let's get into a stretch. So we'll go all the way over to the right. You can either be here if this is the range of your flexibility today, or you can come down here. I'm going to say the same thing for this right heel. If it's way up your butt, you're going to stress out your knee. So if you feel strongly about not wanting to come up any higher, then use something to help ground that heel so that you can put weight down in the heel, or just come up higher. So if we're here and we can't get up, we have no business being there. So decide, is this safer for your body now? And then we'll try the other side. And this is kind of that time when we can just really be honest with ourselves, and we're at home as opposed to in a classroom of people. Sometimes we get sort of caught up in trying to like win the yoga class. So we're just going to go back and forth a couple times. And you're only going to go down as far as you can continue to press yourself up. Maybe just once more each side. Good. Walk the feet on in. And if you'd like, take a gentle fold forward. Awesome. So that will kind of highlight for you the amount of strength and flexibility you have on the inner thighs, known as the adductors. Hip flexors and abductors, the muscles on the outer edges of the hips, are where we'll go next. So having warmed up those legs, take something, some little padding under your knee, and we'll step the right foot forward. Make sure you have enough space in between your legs so that you don't feel like you're on a tightrope. And then we'll just take a lean forward. We're not in a weight-bearing pose, so if your knee comes forward of your ankle, that's okay. Now we have this tendency, we really want to do that feel-good stretch on the front of the hip. But there are some extremely fragile connections here that we don't want to stress out. And so this is another common one where we just kind of dump the weight of the body down into the pelvis, maybe in our Anjaneyasana. So to avoid injury and overstretching here, and to build that close personal relationship between strength and flexibility, we want to kind of pretend like the legs are scissors that are trying to close. Engage those adductor muscles, the inner thighs, towards one another to support and brace these gentle structures on the front of the hip or the hip flexors. This also kind of encourages the low belly to lift in and up and help support as well. And then we'll switch sides. Keep things even. Keeping that nice, strong squeeze of the inner thighs. Just feeling the difference between those two. There's a lot of weight coming straight down into the pelvis here. So if we just dump that down, we really are not, number one, getting the benefit of the shape, and number two, we're not using the proper body mechanics to prevent injury or stress to that area of the body. Good, we'll press on back. So your abductors, or the outer hip muscles, I don't tend to see people being overly flexible here. Tend to see something that is a little bit counterintuitive to start, and it tends to be loss of flexibility from underuse. So because we're a sitting culture, we tend to overuse our quads and underuse or improperly fire our glutes. So if you are somebody who's like, oh, my hips are so tight, that could be because we do way, way, way too much strength exercise. I would say that's, for this area of the body, much less common than improper or underuse of these muscles. So what that might look like is if you're sitting in a cross-legged position, you may be tight and be pulled kind of up like this. Or the thought of doing something like this, or something like this, makes you kind of like, ah! So this muscle group here, along with the glutes, you know, we could go on and on forever about how to strengthen those muscle groups, and perhaps that will be a video for another day. But just to start, we can take an all fours position and just come into some little fire hydrant movements of the leg, hinging the hip out. This also gives you kind of a nice sense of the mobility of the pelvis. We can switch sides, just getting a sense of it here. There are many, many, many other ways to start to learn the proper engagement of the gluteus medius and maximus. It is beyond the scope of our conversation today, but a very, very important one. So moving on up, the reason why we have these two blankets now. First, I want you not to use them. And we're going to come into a warrior two shape. So step your right foot forward and your left foot back. Your heels are going to remain kind of in one line, so almost like a heel tightrope. This back foot, have those toes angled about 45 degrees forward. Remember, kneecap and toes always pointing in the same direction. If you look down and your kneecap's pointing this way, but your toes are out on a 90-degree angle, we're doing this at the knee. So knock those toes forward a little bit. Take a bend in that right knee. We're keeping this back leg pretty straight. Arms can be out to the side if we're in our full warrior two shape. It's not necessary for what we're doing. So if you want to bring hands to hips, that's fine. Now it's tempting when we're in class and we see those mirrors. We want to be like this, right? But it's not necessarily the best thing to do, and we're going to find out why. So it could be great for your body, but it might not be. So we're going to take this same shape, 1 foot on each blanket. Now, please be careful and do this slowly. I don't want anybody slipping or getting injured, and I assume no responsibility for that. So be wise and come on into that shape again. Notice how this is suddenly different. Notice different muscle groups engaging. Suddenly, we really need to pull in and up, legs like scissors trying to close. Otherwise, we're going to come on down into the accidental splits, which is the worst kind of splits. So, practicing yoga like this, as opposed to on that sticky mat, that gives you that false sense of stability and really allows you to dump down into your body, right? I can take Warrior 2 when my feet are not going to slide, and I don't really have to do anything. My feet not moving is what's holding me here, not the strength of my legs. But the idea is to squeeze the feet so firmly towards one another that if you were in ice skates, your legs wouldn't move. So practicing on a slippery surface kind of forces us to find out what the true purpose to each of these shapes is. We're strengthening and toning the legs. Good, let's switch sides. You may start to shake and think, my goodness, for so long I've been in my Warrior 2 shape in my yoga class, pushing my feet out in opposite directions. We should really be hugging in as if you were going to bunch up your yoga mat underneath you. Awesome. Come on up. So I hope that was as much of a mind blower for you as it was for me the first time I learned it. If you already knew it, then hopefully these are just some fun strength drills for you. So using that same concept in downward facing dog, if you've ever been in a yoga class and you're in downward facing dog and you hear maybe the instructor saying, press your hands forward and your feet back like you were going to tear your mat in half. It's probably well-intentioned, but we're not encouraging the proper engagement of the supportive muscle groups that we need for this shape. And so we really get a sense of it here in this drill. So we're going to start in a plank pose. If you want to just watch me the first time, and then we'll do it together, that's fine. We're going to start in plank and get your feet and your hands as far away as you need without moving your hands or your feet. We're going to press up and back into downward facing dog. Now, it's very tempting to kind of slide the feet forward, but that's not the engagement of the proper groups of supportive muscles for this. So I find very few exceptions in yoga. There are some, but very seldom is there an exception to the rule. What's underneath you is what's supporting you. So when you're in this downward facing dog shape, and now let's do it together, come into your plank, start to think, what's underneath me? We have all the muscles facing the floor, okay? Quadriceps, the entire front part of your core, and then triceps, and some of the muscles within the rib cage, your serratus, and maybe even parts of the lateral lats. So lift those hips up and back. Don't move the hands, don't move the feet. Feel that low belly light up. Press your hands down, press your feet down, and then come forward and come on down. I hope that felt different. If you've never done that before for you, then your typical downward facing dog gives us a sense of what the body should be doing in that shape, maybe as opposed to what we've done in the past. So again, that was a big one for me the first time I learned it. I hope it's the same for you. And that really kind of is a nice segue into how we support the spine. Strength and flexibility of the spine really just has to do with the core and how the core supports the spine. So we really got into that engagement of the low belly, the engagement of all of the supportive muscles around the rib cage and into the shoulder girdle. So the flexibility of the spine isn't really flexibility of the spine itself. It's our relationship with all of the muscles that support the spine. And so we oftentimes think of the core just as, our six-pack. But we have two other layers of abdominal muscles. And the transverse abs really, really play into that as well. That wrapping towards the front, as if you were kind of folding in on yourself. Just as important are all the muscles of the back, right? We've got the multifidi that go in between the spinous processes and all of the big, strong muscles of the back. So imagine your core as like a corset wrapping around you. And when you engage it, everything, even the back and the sides of the waist, come in towards the center line as if someone was pulling on those strings of the corset, wrapping everything in towards the center. We can also work with flexibility of those muscles. So even if you don't have one, just a short demonstration, my friend, the exercise ball is a really great way to do that. If you don't have like a yoga wheel at home or something like that, no big deal. You can even do this on the edge of your bed or the side of the couch. But just as a quick demonstration, just opening up the front of the body. It's something that we seldom do. And this is kind of a nice segue into our next area of focus, the shoulder girdle. We don't reach up very much. And so if you're entrenched in the mobility world at all, you've probably read in the last few years something about this movement of hanging. And so imagine like a pull-up bar or something like that, and you're just hanging from it. This is not something that we really do. Our whole world kind of exists right here. We don't have a lot of incentive to pull up very much. And it has really, really impacted the flexibility and the integrity of the musculature of our upper back, like our upper thoracic spine. So even just doing something like this for a while, or if you have a strap, or even that towel we were using earlier, a t-shirt, a belt, anything, just doing something that opens up the front of the body. And you can even bring a little cat-cow element into this, flexing and contracting the spine. You can keep it just in the shoulders, leave the spine in one straight line, and open up that way. Getting on into the elbows and the wrists, this really, again, for the elbows, of course, we can overextend if you're in like a push-up position or a plank pose and you're really locking out in the elbows. That's, of course, going to be stressful to that joint. Wrists, it's not really, doesn't really have much to do with any of the strength or mobility, maybe a little bit of the mobility and the flexibility here. But that's actually, oddly enough, kind of dependent on your core strength. So coming into a plank pose, again, this concept of dumping energy or weight down. So I can be in this plank pose, kind of like hanging in it, right? My hips are kind of hanging. This really feels heavy in my arms. And my joint of my wrist and the heel of my hand is really taking a lot of weight. So to support that, to load the wrists a little bit less, I can do a few things. I can think about what's underneath me and holding me up. So in a plank pose, imagine your legs are what's holding you up. Contract every muscle to every bone. Flex the quadriceps. Hug the belly in and up. Press the hands through the floor to activate the pectoral muscles. Suddenly it doesn't feel like so much work on my wrists, but it's a whole heck of a lot of work for my core and my legs. So keeping the wrists supported in such a way that they're not taking all of the weight of the shape. Same thing goes in downward facing dog. A lot of times we feel like the wrists are taking so much weight, and that might be true. But if we use that strength, squeeze, feet towards hands, hands towards feet, we start to engage here. We feel that wrapping of the triceps back, biceps forward, and we get all of these muscles and the core and the belly holding us up. And it actually ends up being very little weight in wrists. Some little stretches that you can do. Some people are really tight in the forearms and not even aware of it. So stretching like this, or placing the backs of the hands together and the elbows out wide, or you can even do some circles like that in either direction. So, with all of that in mind, I'd like to start over and go back through 3 rounds of sun salutation. You can grab your mat if you want to, or if you want to just use the blankets or hop on some carpet if it's nearby, that's fine. Starting with the feet. It's very seldom that we actually really pay attention to the sensation on the bottoms of our feet. So before anything else, stepping the feet hip width, before we move at all, press the feet down just a little bit more firmly. Feel what that sensation does up the chain of the body. When I press my feet down more firmly, I feel my quadriceps engage. I feel my tailbone kind of start to pull gently downward. I feel the low belly lift and support me. I feel connected to the earth. Keeping the muscles of the core and the rib cage and the shoulders in mind, mindfully inhale and take the arms up overhead. Use the muscles underneath your armpits to lift the arms. Exhale, lift the low belly in and up to make room for yourself to fold forward. Engage the muscles of the back. Pull the shoulder blades down into the back pockets. Lift the low belly. Inhale, come up halfway. Pull the crown of the head forward and the tailbone back. Low belly engages to pull you back down to the floor. Plant the hands. Feel the palms of the hands press firmly into the floor. Step back to plank. Remember all of the engagements in plank and hold it. Gently set the knees down. Maintain that sensation of the hands pressing down and back. Lower all the way down. Engage the muscles of the back. Slide the shoulder blades together and down the back. Inhale, baby cobra. Exhale, release. Firmly press the hands into the floor. Tuck the toes, send the hips back and up, down dog. Squeeze, squeeze, hands towards feet, feet towards hands. Wrap your shoulder blades around towards your armpits. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, step forward and fold. Long spine, belly up, halfway lift. Low belly engages and pulls you downward. Exhale, forward fold. Press your feet firmly down and through the floor to rise up. Exhale, hands to heart, and by your sides. Inhale, reach up. Use the muscles all the way Every movement facilitated not from just passively moving, but actively engaging every muscle. See if you can make it feel significantly different from the first 3 rounds of this that we did at the beginning. You can choose knees down or up. What's underneath you, even though we're moving towards the floor, is still pressing you up. As we transition into down dog, the low belly lifts everything up. Almost nothing else is working there. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, travel forward. Fold, let that fold be passive. And then active, inhale, halfway lift. Top of the head stretching in opposition from the tailbone. Pull the low belly in and up to make room for yourself to fold forward. Firmly press the feet down to engage the muscles of the legs to rise up. Press the palms together. And once more, on your own, I'll just cue the breath. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. 2 breaths. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Last inhale. And exhale. I hope that felt different for you, with some little pieces of new information and new knowledge. If you have any questions for me, you can reach me at renwellness108@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love to hear your feedback, and I'll see you guys next time.